This is a huge statement from the Indian Army, and it's the first statement from the Indian Army that draws China directly into Operation Sindoor. Remember, so far the Indian government, the Indian military, have stayed away from naming China directly in the context of Operation Sindoor. But what Lieutenant General Rahul Singh, the Deputy Chief of the Army Staff, has done in that excerpt that we're playing out, and we'll play that again in just a moment from now, is to not only name China, but identify the well-known nexus between Pakistan and China, and also basically hint at the very real possibility that China played a supporting combatant role in Operation Sindoor. Now remember, China's weapons account for 81%, according to General Rahul Singh, of Pakistan's defense and weaponry arsenal, which is a huge amount. 81% of Pakistan's weaponry is of Chinese origin or supplied directly from China or built under license using Chinese technology. And what General Rahul Singh has basically said is that Pakistan is a laboratory for Chinese weapons. There is every likelihood, obviously, this is the inference that we're making, that China was providing logistical intelligence, support and imagery help to Pakistan during Operation Sindoor. It is safe to assume that that was happening. But for Lieutenant General Rahul Singh to now call it out directly, explicitly, on the record and in public, is to basically say that this wasn't just a battle or a fight against Pakistan. Yes, it was Pakistani airfields that were destroyed and damaged in the course of Operation Sindoor, but it was the entire spectacular failure of many Chinese weapon systems and the active role played by China as part of this nexus that was clearly also defeated during Operation Sindoor. NDTV's Vishnu Shom is also live with me. He and I have been tracking the big fallout of not just this statement, but everything that came before it as well. Vishnu, what are you making of General Rahul Singh's comments on Pakistan as a big proxy, a weapons laboratory for China, and how things played out in this nexus?
I think the most striking statement, Shiv, in all of this was when General Singh said that while the ceasefire process was taking place through talks between the Directors General of Military Operations, the Pakistani side seemed to have real-time information on which Indian vectors, in other words, weapon systems, were primed at that particular juncture. In other words, they were getting real-time information on the presence of the positions of Indian weapon systems, whether they were missile systems, whether there were formations of aircraft, whether it was the actual situation at our air bases or something else. The Pakistanis were able to factor that in, the Indian Army believes, on the basis of help from China, number one. And number two, he said that there were not two players who were against India, China and Pakistan, but a third one as well, Turkey. And he did allude to trained personnel, perhaps alluding to a potential involvement of Turkey directly. Why Turkey? Because we do know that Turkish drones were used in surveillance and possibly attack missions over Indian territory.
Talking about Chinese help, Vishnu, and what General Singh has said is the kind of direct role that China may have played, especially during the ceasefire and otherwise. Is it correct for us to infer that given that 81% of the weaponry used by Pakistan was of Chinese origin, from the HQ-16 air defense systems, which largely failed to deter an Indian attack, to the aircraft they used, to the artillery that they used as well, some of which you saw when you were on the border. Is the Indian Army and the Deputy Chief basically saying that there's bad news for China because many of these weapons actually didn't do the job that they were supposed to?
I think what it does indicate is that India is now aware, or was all along aware, of how Pakistan was operating. Pakistan wasn't operating alone. Pakistan was operating with the assistance of the Chinese, and Chinese assistance, and using obviously Chinese weapon systems, which account for more than 80% of their hardware in the last several years. The J-10, fighter aircraft, the JF-17 fighter aircraft, the HQ-9 surface-to-air missile system, the HQ-16 surface-to-air missile system, electronic warfare systems, potentially Chinese drones as well, and of course naval frigates, which as we know never really deployed. The Pakistani army, the Chinese military presence in terms of equipment in the Pakistani army, tanks, Chinese-made tanks as well, or Chinese-designed tanks, would certainly be a big factor which the Indian army was aware of. And the fact is that China, and this is the other part of what he said, General Singh, is that they operate by sort of putting any number of cuts on their enemy, right? And they don't do that by necessarily getting themselves involved in a direct clash, but using a proxy nation, which in this case is Pakistan, to try and inflict that, in this case on us, partly to try and test, whether their weapon systems work or not. But just briefly to answer your question, did their weapon systems work, the Chinese ones? No, not really.
Vishnu, finally, from a geopolitical perspective, what does this mean as far as India-China relations are concerned? India's defense minister, national security advisor were in China just last week. There is an active dialogue between India and China, unlike between India and Pakistan. There is a live standoff situation between India and China that has been festering for, the better part of 5 years now. So for India to now, and the deputy chief of the army staff is no small fry. He's a big officer, clearly, has the sanction and the mandate to make a comment like this, even at a sensitive time. What does it mean geopolitically to sort of explicitly bring China into the Operation Sindoor conversation?
Well, I think he's the second very senior, officer in the Indian Armed Forces who's actually been speaking his mind. Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh has been speaking his mind in public in a different context. But in this particular context, if you look at the sequence of events, we've had Defense Minister Rajnath Singh speak to his US counterpart Pete Hegseth, saying that if we feel that Pakistan is going to inflict terror again on Indian soil, we reserve the right of attacking them. In other words, not ruling out preemptive strikes. We've had the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, making that remark in the last 48 hours in different words, again in the United States. And now you've got the Deputy Chief of the Army saying that, look, if China is part of this entire process of helping Pakistan, then that's very clear for us what the nature of the threat actually is, not as far as terrorism is concerned, but overt and covert military assistance. The relationship with China is not normal. It will not be until that situation on the border is fixed. It's nowhere close to being fixed right now. So as we take a step forward in diplomacy, air links, etc., the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, the overall strategic engagement of China with Pakistan remains a huge concern.
Vishnu, thanks for that. We'll keep tracking this. Personally, very happy to see someone explicitly call out Pakistan as a Chinese weapons laboratory. And boy, has that experiment not been up to expectations from China. Many learnings, many of them accounting for very bad news. China will in some ways have to go back to the drawing board, perhaps with some of these weapons, to see what went so badly wrong for them and why they failed to defend Pakistani airspace and Pakistani airfields. Vishnu and I will continue to track that story through primetime here on NDTV.